How fast can you fix your marriage? I mean, how fast can a marriage be turned around? Well, the answer will surprise you. Now, we can help you do this in as little as 3 days or even much less. We've got all kinds of tricks up our sleeves, and if one doesn't get you, well, then the other one will. But the thing is, we can only do this with your help. In fact, we can't do it at all. Only you can fix your marriage. And that's because you've got the keys to all your marriage problems, but they're locked up in a vault inside you. You've got this inner intelligence that knows exactly what to do. You've just lost touch with it. Now, our job is to remind you that you've got it, to coach you a little bit, and to help you with your psychology so that you stop getting in your own way. It's not just so typical for guys, right? We don't read the instructions and then we wonder why we have problems. Well, it's just that way with our marriages, right? We didn't read the manual. Well, and for the most part, none of us even had a manual. Our parents didn't provide one. Our school system didn't provide one. And even our religions have kind of dropped the ball, and they've done it time and time again. But the really cool thing is that we've got one inside of us. We have the intuition and the inner knowing of what we need to do to have an outstanding marriage. And once you tap into that, turning your marriage around happens faster than you can imagine.
The great news is that we have a very simple process to help you identify what you need to do to get from where you are to where you want to be. The reality is that most men and most women have the same basic needs. And if you fill their top 2 needs at a high level, you'll have a happy spouse. According to American psychologist John Gottman, most women's top 5 needs are affection, conversation, honesty and openness, and financial support and family commitment, of course. Well, for most men, they're admiration and respect, their sexual fulfillment, home support, her attractiveness, and recreational companionship. Once you identify what's important to your spouse and create a plan to fill these needs at a high level, and you'll take a quantum leap towards fixing all your marriage problems freaky fast.
That's so true. So true. So here's the thing. When I say that we have our own inner intelligence, we all actually know what to do, right? I mean, you know what to do. But the reason we don't do it is because we've stopped paying attention. We lost the sensory acuity. We lost sensitivity to our mate. We've turned down the sensitivity knobs because we can only handle so much of what life is throwing at us. The problem is that when we're performing triage on our life, our mate's needs are often the ones that become low priority. We've allowed our careers, our extended family, our children, our friends, and even hobbies to distract us from the main thing. We've distracted ourselves with social media and the economy and our investing and what's going on in politics. And in the process, we've tuned our mate out and we've turned a blind eye to the very things that you know in your heart need to be done. In fact, even in the battlefield of life, we can know what it is that we need to be doing and what we're avoiding because it's the very thing that we don't want to do. And the thing that we avoid is usually the shortest path back to what we want. And so if you want the really freaky fast way to turn your relationship around, it's find out what people that have outstanding marriages do. You know those people that have been married for 20, 30, or even 50 years and they still seem to have it going on? Find out what they do and you do the very same things. Find out how they think. Observe how they communicate with each other. Observe how they look at each other and how they spend time together. How much quality time do they spend together? Observe how they react to each other in different circumstances. Observe how they give each other gifts and how they collaborate on their futures together and how they plan together. All of these things are clues into what's making an outstanding lifelong love affair. And we're going to give you some of the tips on how to do that. Now, the converse of this is that you need to know what not to do in your relationship. So equally, you've got to go find those people that have been divorced or are divorced and who have relationships that are just, hell on wheels crappy, right? And observe what they do. And then don't do those things at all cost. It's that simple. So this is it. If you want a happy, lifelong love affair, do what happily married people do and avoid those things that people with crappy marriages do. This is the universal law of success, and it applies to any field.
What Tad is saying here is a very simple concept that's difficult to execute without a plan. To make this awareness something more than just an aha moment, you must understand this one distinction has the power to create a profound effect when it's implemented. For example, if there are things that you do that really light up your spouse, the things that mean the most to them, you have to plan for it. For example, if rock star sex is really important to your husband, you have to set yourself up for success. You have to plan the time to prepare yourself emotionally and physically. You take time for a nap if needed. You arrange for a sitter to trade time with or a friend to watch the kids. You might even meditate. You do whatever you need to do so that when you're with them, you're present and you're engaged. If a weekly date night and dancing is important to your wife, plan for it in advance. You make that reservation. You show up clean and well-dressed. Hey, this is your lady. This isn't just any date. You put your cell phone on silent mode when you're engaged in conversation with her. The number one thing I want to drive home here is that you have to do things differently than the way you've been doing them. And the only way to execute this on a consistent basis is to plan for it.
I love that. I love that. So the next thing we've got to do is we've got to make a plan. But plan to do what? Well, we're going to boil this down into a plan that you can execute. But the first thing you're going to do is, right? Let's just say you're driving down the road and you're headed for a brick wall. What do? Well, the first thing you do is you take your foot off the gas, right? And then you put your foot on the brake and slow down. And these are the things you've got to do before you can turn around. So let's just say with your marriage, what are you going to do? You've got to stop immediately doing those things, right, that are running you into the wall, right? Before you can turn around and go the direction that you want. You've got to stop doing those things that are creating separation between you and your mate, right? Those things that are giving you this negative experience. In other words, stop doing all those things that kill the attraction that your mate has for you. Stop doing those things that you know diminishes your mate's desire to have sex with you. Stop doing those behaviors that kill their emotional connection with you, and you know what those things are because they've told you. And if they don't actually tell you directly, they're leaving clues for you all the time, especially women.
Oh, this is such a super important distinction here about what we're sharing is that while you're making an effort to do the right things, it's equally, if not more important for you to stop doing the wrong things, your behavior that erodes the foundation of your love for each other. You can be doing all the right things, but if you are doing things that are hurtful to your mate, you will never dig yourself out of emotional debt. If you're criticizing, if you're condemning, if you're ungrateful, if you demonstrate lack of interest in what's important to them, maybe you refuse to educate yourself in subjects that encourage meaningful conversation, you're creating an emotional chasm. You need to be observant of your mate's response to your behavior, their body language, their eye contact, even their tone of voice is feedback. Maybe you constantly interrupt your wife when she's communicating with you or others in a group. Maybe you criticize her in front of other people, or maybe you laugh at her expense. Whatever it is that you're doing that causes the most pain, you're going to not only have to make a plan, but you're going to have to set an environment and a reminder ahead of time to do things differently. If I have the habit of interrupting my husband, how do I do that differently? Well, that's what I always do. You actually have to think about it in advance, just as much as if you wanted to go out for a wonderful dinner, but you're on a diet. You decide in advance. I'm only going to have one glass of wine, for example. I'm going to order the fish dinner instead of the nachos. I'm going to skip dessert. You decide before the experience to set the odds in your favor. So you start looking at what's in your environment that's shaping your current response and change it. So for example, if your husband gets upset when he trips over the kids' toys, create a plan so that the environment supports what matters most. They're put away. If I want to have a meaningful kiss before I walk out the door to go to work, I need to have a reminder before I leave because, hey, life interrupts what we want most. If I'm going to touch base with my husband at noon every day because this is something that's important to him, I might put a timer on my phone. The point is, I make decisions that support what matters most. And if you don't do this, this is nothing more than an entertaining conversation.
So Kimberly gets a lot more detailed than I do, right? Okay, so the first thing you're going to do is you're going to stop the train wreck, right? That's the number one thing, because your mate's not going to be very receptive to your loving gestures if you're doing things that make them not want to be around you or even listen to you. Now, you can lie to yourself and you can say that you don't do any of these things, but you know better. You know that if you dig deep inside into your heart and you look at yourself from your mate's perspective, you know what those things are. So the fastest way to turn things around in your relationship is to identify the top 3 things that you do that your mate despises the most, and quit doing those things cold turkey. You've got to make a choice. You've got to make a real decision. And then you start rehearsing how you're going to do it differently when these instances rise up, where that behavior typically comes out. Does that make sense? Mm-hmm. All right. The second thing you're going to do is you're going to find out the top 3 things that your mate has, those top 3 things that they want you to do, those top 3 things that make them feel the most loved and the most connected to you, that makes them feel significant to you, makes them feel honored, respected, makes them feel alive when they're around you. Now, if you really think about it, you know what those things are. You know at least 1 or 2 of them, and you've probably been consciously avoiding them. You've been avoiding them because they're the things that maybe don't make sense to you, and they're not how you feel loved. Maybe you've been avoiding them because you just don't want to do it. Maybe you've been avoiding that trip that she wants to go on so bad, or he wants to go on so badly. Or you've been avoiding that meaningful time together. Maybe you've been avoiding that conversation that needs to be had. Or maybe you just haven't been patient or kind.
This new behavior is not going to feel good. It's most likely going to feel uncomfortable, but you do it anyways. And guess what? Eventually it's going to feel great, because the response that you get from your husband or wife is going to fill you, and it's going to change the behavior over time because you have a positive feedback loop. But in the beginning, it will feel like a mental battle. You'll want to say that thing that you want because it'll help you win the conversation. But do you really want to win a conversation at the expense of emotional disconnect, potentially at the expense of your marriage? I think so often we don't realize how we're sabotaging ourselves with our current behavior. And all we need to do is to recognize that the same behavior is only going to bring more of the same. We have to do it differently, even when we don't feel like it. And the biggest part of that is getting leverage on yourself in advance. All of this has to be preparation of setting the stage, whether it's habits, whether it's environment, whether it's rehearsal in your mind, so that you will do it differently the next opportunity.
So good, so good. So we call this technique the 3x3 method. So write it down if you haven't, because if you don't write this stuff down, you're going to forget it, right? It's like sermons at church. You'll listen to it and you're like, oh, that was so good, but then you go home and you forget all about it. And then Monday comes, and guess what? You're right back into your old programming, right back into your old self, your old habits, right? Your old ways. So write this stuff down. you've got to write down the 3 things that you're going to stop doing and the 3 things that you're going to start doing. And it all starts with a decision. So make a decision. Make a choice, because a great marriage is a choice that you make every day. And the only thing preventing you from turning your marriage around really, really freaky fast is you getting in your own way and not doing what you know to do because you've got some excuse. You've got some reason, some belief, something that says that you can't do it because so much has happened maybe. There's so much water under the bridge, or somebody needs to forgive somebody, or because you just don't feel like it. Or maybe you think that too much time has passed or whatever. You've got to get over that stuff. You can't let what's happened in the past determine the present and the future that you want. Because if you do, the past will just continue to repeat itself. And so that's really it in a nutshell, folks.
Some of this might seem overwhelming, but in reality, you actually already know this intuitively in your heart. The very best things in life you can't buy, and the very best things in life you have to put effort into. Make that recognition that you're investing in the future, and you're going to have a lifelong love affair, a marriage that most people could only dream of experience. And the reason why you have it is because you're putting in the work. You've made the effort. You've discovered these important distinctions, and you're implementing them. Think about how hard it would be to make a great chocolate chip cookie if you had no idea what the ingredients were that made a great cookie and you had no recipe. We're giving you both. We're going to give you the ingredients and the recipe for a great marriage.
I love you, baby. And we're going to continue to give you new paradigm shifting videos on a weekly basis. Now, next week is going to be a bomb where we're going to teach you how to 10x your marriage before the end of 2024. We really appreciate you. We hope you took notes, right? Start doing it. No excuses. The marriage of your dreams is just right around the corner. So thanks for being here. Please help us make marriage great again by subscribing to our channel, liking this video, and sharing it with somebody that you think might benefit. And hey, make sure you join us for the next one. Thanks for being here.
See you next time.